If you could drive a car straight up in the air at interstate highway speed, you get to the top of it in 5 to 7 minutes. You could walk it in an hour. That's what we're using as an open sewer.
At least 80 countries are in favor of a phase-out, with some major fossil fuel producers, and that includes Saudi Arabia, China, and India, remain opposed.
There was a time when this climate diplomacy was kind of what drove climate action. That's really no longer, I don't think, the case. Really what's driving it is private sector activity, real people on the ground doing real things. The energy transition is happening in a big way now. Whatever gets discussed here in some ways, this could help it, could maybe hinder it a little bit, but the driving force, very different than 10 years ago or 15 years ago, is people on the ground, businesses, governments actually doing things.
We are past the point now where the climate negotiations contribute anything substantial, really. So the Paris Agreement was a seminal change. That really was liftoff. Like, that got us off the ground. And literally that changed from like the circular firing squad that was the Kyoto Protocol to a weight loss club where everybody gets to play.
Every piece of legislation, whether it's at the municipal level, the regional or provincial level, the national level, or the international level, they're in there with their lobbyists and with their fixers and with their revolving door colleagues, doing everything they can to slow down progress. They have used fraud on a massive scale.
We didn't come here to sign our death sentence, and the text in its current state is that.
Critics are pointing the finger at Saudi Arabia and a handful of other countries for resisting any agreement on wiping out oil and gas by 2050.
For decades now, the companies have had the evidence, they know the truth, and they consciously decided to lie to publics all around the world in order to calm down the political momentum for doing something about it, so they could make more money.
Hello and welcome to episode 191 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, things are so dire at the COP28 climate conference, delegates simply applaud when a member from a country getting consumed by a rising ocean cries. Seriously, here's a clip of Joseph Sakulu of 350 Pacific at COP28, unable to speak. Brian, I wish people would applaud when I cry hell. I wish I could cry. It'd be cathartic. Instead, I just make rage-filled videos online scare the daylights out of people.
Volkswagen has announced massive layoffs with the goal of saving $10.8 billion by 2026. The Clean Energy Show is not immune to financial pressures, so we have some layoffs of our own to announce. Our intern program has been canceled. The pre-show omelet bar is on hiatus. Our talent booker has been let go due to a lack of booking talent. The live band that plays the theme song every week will be replaced with a recording. And our personal massage therapist will be reduced to one show a month.
Oh, God, my back can't take that. India is building what could be the world's largest renewable energy project. One so big it will be visible from space. According to developers, the project will cost $2.25 billion, or the cost of the lunchroom at a new nuclear reactor plant.
$3 billion in federal funding will help launch a new high-speed rail service between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. I'm not sure how this information leaked out, as it is my understanding that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
All that and more on this special edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week's show, Brian, the premier of oil-rich Saskatchewan, Canada, gets thoroughly debunked, and I enjoy a good debunking, you know that.
Love it.
Our atmosphere is one sheet of paper thick, says Al Gore, and I will demonstrate. And he's an angry man, Al Gore. You know what? So am I, if you haven't noticed from our online escapades. EV sales aren't as bad as you've heard. solar is growing too fast. Is the end of oil here? Could be. Regardless, we'll show you what the beginning of the end might look like as OPEC seems to be falling apart. And if that's not enough, we find out that over 50% of battery minerals mined today will still be in use 130 years from now. I hope you didn't spit out your lunch, but that's true. How are you?
That's amazing. I'm good. So quick update on my heat pump. I've been trying to figure out the right settings to turn it down at night so that the auxiliary heating doesn't kick in the morning. And it's been getting down to, minus 15 Celsius or so. Anyway, I had to switch it to Fahrenheit, which I am loath to do. I mean, I didn't have to, but the thermostat doesn't have half degrees.
No, it doesn't.
If you're working in Celsius, you really need half degrees. And I've had other thermostats that did have half degrees. A degree Celsius is just larger than a degree Fahrenheit. So,
two of them.
I looked into getting a new thermostat, but because it's a whole thing with the heat pump system, it's kind of specifically made. It's not made for the heat pump, but we know that it works with the heat pump. So, I had to switch it to Fahrenheit, and I hated to do that.
Half a degree Celsius is 1 degree Fahrenheit, roughly. That's a big change, I find, in home comfort.
It's about 0.6, I think, is what I've been figuring out.
But you know what? We had a couple of Priuses, a Prii, for, the better part of a decade or so. And now we've got the Chevy Bolt EV, and it doesn't have half degrees when you set the automatic climate control. And it drives me nuts. It's like 1's too hot, 22 is too hot, 21's too cold. And that's just the way it is. Maybe I should switch that to Fahrenheit. I mean, I do my pool temperature in Fahrenheit because every degree is like $1 million.
Yeah.
It's and pool temperatures chemistry is, has always been Fahrenheit.
But of course, I'm the oldest person in my household, so I grew up with Fahrenheit. But nobody else in my household grew up with Fahrenheit. So
I had a taste of it. I don't say that it's really set in with me.
Yeah, it switched in Canada sometime in the, mid-70s or so.
We have billboards up now in this city, this agricultural city where we live in Canada, and there's Fahrenheit displayed on, sometimes just Fahrenheit, because, people older than us are all that matters, and we're pretty damn old. But they're catering to the stupid old people. Or maybe it's kept going with rural people. I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing, which is kind of sad.
We still have a mixture of imperial and metric here in Canada. We didn't switch everything, but, Celsius took hold pretty well.
Neil deGrasse Tyson has a great video out on how the United States actually is embracing Celsius in a lot of ways, and he lists all the ways that they are, or I should say the metric system in general. And that's quite interesting because you realize that really they have in a lot of ways. I mean, drug dealers sell by the gram, right? So that's not what he mentioned, but it's there. It's Christmas here in North America, Brian, and I set up my bee tree because I'm really in the Christmas spirit this year.
What's a bee tree?
That's my second Christmas tree on the second floor. And we bought this discounted train that attaches to your tree, which is absurd. It's like a Christmas decoration that attaches to your tree.
Yeah, we had one of those years ago. It's a track that runs around the tree, like sort of halfway up the tree.
Well, I gave up on it. I've had it for 10 years, and I've given up on it every year. But this year, I was determined, because the Christmas spirit runs large now with me. Well, it has to, because we're not buying that many presents this year. So the Christmas spirit of lights and everything we have is fully deployed this year. And I was determined to get that sucker on our artificial smaller tree, and there was some accidents, and it's basically broken now. But anyway, actually, interestingly, I was looking for where the batteries were, and they were in the coal compartment, which I thought was somehow interesting. So I dug up the little fake coal, and there was the batteries. But after the first crash, the battery sort of half dislodged, and I picked it up like 20 minutes later and burnt myself because it was shorting out. One of the AA batteries shorted out and got very, very hot. And I'm not sure that accident would have not burned down our house, like eventually. I don't know. There's a lot of fires in this city right now, all of a sudden. I wonder what it has to do with Christmas and holiday trains that attach to trees. If you've been paying attention on our many other internet feeds, I have a video that, of course, went viral again. 12,000 or 13,000 Twitter, which is the equivalent of 1.3 million TikTok views.
Right.
But it's kind of like that. I mean, it's hard to get views on Twitter, but for some reason I've been having viral videos on Twitter lately. So I decided to get angry the other day because I got this SAS Power, our utility company survey, and I'm going to be very calm about it this time, but basically they over and over again say, in no uncertain terms, are you sure you want to pay more for clean energy? Like, how much are you willing to pay? How much land are you willing to give up? Because it shows here, we live in a city of 200,000 plus people. It shows here, if you're watching on YouTube, half that city, which is a infinitely small dot. It's a pinprick on the map. If you look at a satellite view of Saskatchewan, our province, this is a big trapezoid rectangular thing. And our city is a dot. And they don't want to give up half that freaking dot to save the planet. They're asking you, is that okay? Because I got a pipeline outside my house that goes for hundreds and hundreds. That's not thousands of kilometers. And it's 100 meters wide at least. Yeah. Nobody asked me if, the pipeline, do you want to give up some land for oil? Nobody asks that. It's incredibly frustrating. And if you want to hear my rage, go on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, wherever we are, and see it. And they're thinking their mix is like 9% solar in 2050. 9 or 8%. 8% solar. I've got 40% of my roof is giving me 40% of my little house here. It's a tiny roof that faces south, and it's giving me 40% of my energy needs. And solar panels in 2050 will be cheaper than cornflakes. They'll be cheaper than cornflakes, and they're thinking 8%. That's pretty ambitious. I think that's what we could do. 8%. And we're the sunniest place in Canada. It's incredible how sunny we are and how much energy we have, and we're giving it away here. And I just wanted to also mention, because I wanted the debunking of our premier, our governor of sorts, went to Dubai to the climate conference COP28 to set up a $1 million booth to tell people how sustainable we are. Sustainable, I'm using quotes, okay? Because sustainable doesn't mean a whole lot nowadays. And when it comes to a warming planet, this was a good tweet from somebody that was on Markham Hislop's show.
Calgary physician, Dr. Joe Vipin.
I retweeted it, and it was wrong. He made an innocent mistake. He said Saskatchewan. So he said Saskatchewan instead of Alberta. He says Saskatchewan has more emissions than Spain as a country. So I told my son that, and he said I didn't. That's crazy. I need to know that's verified so I can tell people. So I went to verify it. Couldn't find any verification. So I went to the comments of the tweet, and the first comment is, "Oh, sorry, I got that wrong." He's a doctor, but he got it wrong, and it's actually Alberta. So there's a big difference. Alberta's a bigger province, more people, 5 times the people, much more industry with the oil industry.
Yeah, probably about 3 times more of the people. I'm not sure it's that much bigger. It's physically about the same size.
It's still pretty abysmal, but it's not the same as our tiny province. So, I'm going to play a clip from that just to hear, because our province, there's been a lot of political things going on in Canada about our particular province not wanting to give up on fossil fuels, and he debunked. This is what he said about our premier.
Today, we're at the metro station, the Dubai Metro, and behind me is the Saskatchewan advertisement that's been running all of COP. It's coming and going. They've spent untold numbers of dollars to tell the world that they have really low carbon potash, and also that they produce uranium, which decreases emissions, of course, because nuclear is emissions free. But that's called paltering. That's called cherry picking. They're not talking about all the other things they do. That for one of the biggest oil and gas producers in Canada, that actually their emissions are 65 tons per capita. That's double that of Dubai. It's actually one of the highest in the world from a jurisdiction's perspective. If it was a country, it would be more emissions than all of Spain on an absolute measure. So that's a good try, Saskatchewan, but we're debunking that. You are not a green province.
So he was at COP28, and remember, he's actually talking about Alberta.
Yep.
But it is a load of crap, the stuff they're selling. And he went on X, apparently, our premier, and said that Canada has the safest and most reliable, as well as the most environmentally sustainable oil production that you can find on Earth. So our local CBC station, that is our public broadcaster, has a local radio station, and they have a show called The Morning Edition. Emily Eaton, the department head of geography and environmental studies at the University of Regina,
where I used to work.
Where we went to school. Local university told the CBC's Morning Edition that it is very far from the truth. If it's definitely not one of the safest supplies in the world, and there are many different aspects to that, and many different research reports that show that the claims that the government is making are simply not adding up in the field, she said. She also said that while Canada touts its regulations, they're not well enforced and they're based on self-reporting. Eaton said that those claims are false and draw from an erroneous Canadian Press article about the research paper. So the Canadian Press made a mistake. That's like AP in Canada, the Associated Press, our local, press organization. Made a mistake about the research paper, and they corrected it in April 2023. Which reminds me, that tweet that I said, it was seen by like tens and tens of thousands of people, if not 100,000 plus. Mm-hmm. And the correction was seen by 80.
Yeah.
So I corrected it. I retweeted it initially and then corrected it. But it just goes to show, I mean, people just, they do bias confirmation and retweet and get that little fix of endorphins and dopamine, and then it keeps spreading. Negative things keep spreading, and I don't want to be wrong. So you have to be careful, and you should be double checking things, especially when they're from somebody who you're not familiar with. Okay, so she goes on to say that the research article actually states that Norway's regulations, if applied globally, could achieve 25% lower emissions from oil production. Norway, not Canada. And that paper also calculated that Canada has the fourth most carbon-intensive oil on the planet. So it's quite the opposite, Brian.
It's the opposite.
Basically the opposite of what these stinking bastards are saying. Speaking of me getting angry, Al Gore, I watched a TED Talk with him from something like 3 or 4 months ago. He did, and he was talking about the COP conference being led by an oil country and an oil president. Now, boy, was he pissed off, and he should be. I listened to his Bloomberg podcast interview, and the first question was, why are you so pissed off? You're different now. And he said, well, you gotta be. Because it's been 23 years or something like that since An Inconvenient Truth, which I would like to salute sometime on the show, because apparently it's had not just an effect on me, but an effect on many, many people in this world. So it was actually a very important documentary from an unlikely person. Yeah. So here's Al Gore talking about how our Earth's atmosphere is being used as a sewer.
If you could drive a car straight up in the air at interstate highway speeds, you get to the top of it in 5 to 7 minutes. You could walk it in an hour. That's what we're using as an open sewer.
So I've got a planet here. This is Earth. Okay. This isn't a big full-size scale globe. If you're watching on the YouTube or somewhere else, it's smaller than a globe. A globe, 2 pieces of paper. Okay, printer paper put together, that's our atmosphere. That's where the oxygen is. And this is 1 piece of paper on this globe. It's ridiculous. It's nothing. Okay? Yeah. This is what we're polluting. This is what the oil industry wants us to drag completely into hell, and so they can make a few bucks and then die rich. And screw them. So Al Gore, he got angry.
But for decades now, the companies have had the evidence, they know the truth, and they consciously decided to lie to publics all around the world in order to calm down the political momentum for doing something about it, so they could make more money.
Now, having said that, at the end of his TED Talk, he actually gets positive. He says that if we can stop emissions, there's new research that says the climate won't be so bad. And we'll have that at the very end of the show, so we're looking forward to that.
This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
And now on to our COP28 coverage. Brian, we delayed recording by a day, hoping that there would be some news from COP28, and they have not. They're going to go into Wednesday now and finalize things. But here's the latest.
The latest draft of the climate deal released late last night totally dropped language to phase down or phase out the use of fossil fuels. It just said countries should take action that could include reducing their production and consumption of fossil fuels. Now, this is a major blow to those who expected ambitious action to slow global warming. Former Vice President Al Gore posted on X, "It is deeply offensive to all who have taken this process seriously." He also said this COP is on the verge of complete failure and that the deal reads as if OPEC dictated it word for word.
It's midnight Wednesday in Dubai as we record this, Tuesday afternoon in North America. And negotiations at COP28 are going into the night, apparently, but there's suddenly more confidence. Negotiators are closer to bridging divisions on the future of fossil fuels. Say news reports, The Guardian reports that the final text will most likely be released Wednesday morning. And at least a quarter, this is a fact here, Brian, a quarter of the billionaires registered as delegates at COP made their fortunes from highly polluting industries, such as petrochemicals. So, yeah, you got to love climate conferences with billionaires there that aren't there to solve things, but are there to make sure that their pockets continue to be lined. You know what, Brian? Fossil fuels have been a major part of COP28, and they drive everyone crazy who cares about the future. And the fact that the president runs an oil company, the state oil company in Dubai, UAE. So I was recalling an article I read a couple of weeks ago that recalled an interview I saw on Markham Hislop's show of about a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It was talking about how when oil goes away, it's going to be ugly, that they're not going to be able to keep demand up because those who want to keep selling oil, even at a low price, are going to want the volume, basically. Yeah. And OPEC is going to fall apart. Well, November 29th, the New York Times had an article called, "In a Shaky Oil Market, OPEC Has Bitter Decisions to Make." So even as the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries tries to cut output, supplies from other producers, notably the United States, are growing. And that's just before they postponed a meeting of OPEC because they were really worried because prices were 2 weeks ago, it was 80. Now it's like 70 or less than 70. So it's dropped even as producers in OPEC plus a bigger group that includes Russia have cut production. So they've cut the production and it continues to drop. A large part of that is because of the Chinese economy is not doing well right now. But it's also because some displacement from two-wheel, three-wheel EVs and full-on EVs, as well as energy efficiencies and the fact that people actually care about this stuff. So the coming months seem unlikely to give oil producers a respite from the squeeze, the New York Times says. They also say, after 3 years of pandemic recovery and robust increases in demand for oil, appetite is expected to slow in 2024. The main reasons China, which accounted for 3/4 of the global growth in 2023, is facing an economic slowdown. And also remember that China is leading the world in the EV revolution. So, and in solar and wind and everything else. So there will be little need for increased output from the producers group in the early part of 2024, or perhaps longer, analysts say. At the same time, analysts forecast that drilling in countries like the United States and Brazil are not members of OPEC, who are not members of OPEC, remember, is likely to increase output enough to meet the additional global oil consumption that emerges in 24 and possibly in later years. You see, the United States has an abundance of oil and gas from fracking. They suddenly are an exporter.
Yeah, they've really pumped up, so to speak, their oil production in the last several years. So there was a time when the OPEC countries could basically control the price of oil by cutting back on production, but now there's enough oil production outside of OPEC that they don't have the control that they once had, and countries like the U.S. are unlikely to cut their production even with lower prices.
So the New York Times goes on to say the International Energy Agency projects that global demand will increase by a modest 930,000 barrels a day, an amount that could easily be covered by increases by producers outside of OPEC+. Like the United States, OPEC's leverage over the markets is weakened when non-OPEC countries are in a better position to meet growing demand. And that really screws them. And we like to be screw OPEC since 1970s when we were dealing with the conversion from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Those were the days. That was right during the oil crisis when metric came in here. These cuts are also diminishing the oil earnings that are key to Saudi Arabia's government budget and its ambitions to invest in businesses not linked to oil, including the LIV Professional Golf Tour, Newcastle United, a soccer team in England's Premier League, which is hilarious. This month, for instance, Saudi Aramco, the national oil company, blamed lower oil sales in part for a fall in net income of 23% in the third quarter, a drop of $10 billion from a year earlier. Reuters yesterday says American production accounts for 80% of the increase in the global oil supply this year. The Energy Agency has calculated OPEC, in effect, is losing power in the oil market at a time when oil is losing power with cost-wary and climate-conscious consumers. In Bloomberg on December 9th, the country's implied gasoline consumption, this is America, has fallen to more than 200,000 barrels a day below seasonal norms, while supply has increased. But why? 4 million EV autos on the road and growing, and numbers of electric bikes are exploding. EVs are going to grow by 115,000 a month. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Every month that passes, 115,000 potentially oil-consuming cars off the road replaced by EVs.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, 2023, they've already hit 1 million EVs sold in the U.S. for 2023, and that should only go up in 2024.
You know, the incumbents are struggling with that EV adoption, and you have more on that.
Yeah, so a few sort of automotive stories related to that. The first one is VW. They've announced some big cuts. A new report, this is from Electrek, says that the company will cut 1/5 of its administrative staff, but it's hoping to do that as much as possible by early retirements as opposed to, all-out layoffs. So they're trying to save $10.8 billion by 2026. So they're going to cut their workforce and expenses. They're going to try other things like reducing the time of their product cycles. That used to be 50 months to, introduce a new product. They're going to try and get that down to 3 years. They're going to try and slash the overall production times. They're going to try offering fewer models with fewer options and trims. And they had planned a new R&D site in Wolfsburg, Germany, that was going to cost 800 million euros, and they're going to scrap that. So R&D, they're going to have to make do in the existing facilities, which seems like it's entirely possible. And Ford here is this is from Drive Tesla Canada. They are slashing their production of the F-150 Lightning, their electric pickup truck. They're going to cut production about in half compared to what they were doing in 2023. So they say the drastic reduction is due to changing market demand. They're just not seeing maybe a huge enough demand for the Ford F-150 Lightning. And of course, they're facing the same kind of cost pressures that everyone else. And then finally, Stellantis. Stellantis is also heading down the road of, substantial layoffs.
Ford they had record sales of the F-150 Lightning, it's not that bad. Their sales are starting to go up. The problem is they're starting, and this is what Tesla did, they're starting with the most expensive vehicles because they'd lose money on them. They're not... They don't have efficiencies in place to compete with pure EV, manufacturers.
Yeah, you sell the higher end, more expensive trims first, and then as you get more production, you start offering the cheaper ones. But of course, if you're not turning a profit, it's a lot harder to swallow selling those cheaper models.
Now, I can see rednecks and Bubba's not jumping on the board of the electric pickups right away, okay, truck owners. But I can see fleets doing it. Because it's a business decision, it's a bottom line decision, and there is great advantages. For the first batch of them would go to environmentally conscious companies that want to project environmental consciousness, right? You want an electric pickup. And beyond that, it's the bottom line. It saves money. If you have 10 vehicles, if you have 100 or 1,000, you're a fleet manager, you want to save money. You want to get that Christmas bonus by saving the corporation, $1 million or whatever in operating costs. That's a big deal, and that's going to happen. But they're not making the fleet vehicles. They're making the fully loaded vehicles for the initial adopters. And if they could get down to that, and I know why they're not making them, is because they would lose money on them. They offered, Tesla offered $40,000 for their starting price, and it's $60,000. And Ford said that they would be somewhere down there too, and they're not. And they're just not making those base vehicles very much.
Yeah, and of course, interest rates are still high. So high interest rates always affects vehicle sales because most people are, borrowing or leasing to buy their cars. So it's a tough environment. And of course, for people like us that follow this closely, the other thing for Ford and the other automakers is the Tesla connector is coming in a couple of years. So, the vehicles will all be a lot more attractive once they have the Tesla connector, because then suddenly it opens up that bigger charging network.
Is that there was supposed to be an adapter early in 2024? We'll see if it's mid 2024. And then the new models after that, maybe even later in the year, could come out with the NACS.
No, that's very true. Adapters were supposed to kind of bridge the gap, but I haven't heard anything about those for a while. So yeah, sometime in 2024, adapters available. Of course, the whole Tesla network is still not open in North America to other vehicles. So they've got to open the network and make the adapter available. And it appears, we're still some months away from that.
I was reading a post on one of the Chevy Bolt forums in the United States. Somebody was using the Magic Dock and said it was very difficult. You'd had to take up 2 stalls, and there's still some bugs that were, but that was their problem. The problem wasn't the charging speed or getting the app to work. It all worked pretty flawlessly. So
yeah, because the Tesla chargers, they have a fairly short cord because they were built for Tesla vehicles, and it's the charging connector is in the same spot on all the Tesla vehicles, but not necessarily the same spot on other vehicles.
Mine, for instance, is in the front left of my passenger door, just in front of the passenger door on the side, which is pretty convenient. I prefer that to the back. My old Leaf has it on the front, on the bottom, on the front of the hood, basically, which is not that different, but probably easier to charge if you were charging it at a Tesla supercharger. So, Brian, solar is getting too big. As we've said on recent episodes, solar is taking off so much. This has become so cheap and there's so much investment in it that it may be becoming too big. And this is from Bloomberg. China is changing its power system in ways that reduce payments to solar providers while making energy storage more profitable as an unprecedented boom in new panels destabilizes grids across the country. And when your solar becomes too big, what do you have to do? You have to start building the storage. So they're incentivizing storage over solar now.
Yeah, and with solar being so cheap, it's being thrown onto the grid in big numbers, really not just China, but all over the world, and utilities have to deal with that.
And that holds true to what BNEF solar analyst Jenny Chase said that we had on our show recently. She says solar is growing too fast and cannibalizing itself in some cases. Not here, not in Saskatchewan, though. It'll be 2,300 before we get up to 9%. Sorry, don't get me started. She said in a recent interview, single axis, solar panels, this is the kind that I took a video of and showed you down by Weyburn, an hour and a half south of us. One of the very few solar parks we have in our province. It's, I think, one of 2 or 3 so far, and they're just little 10 megawatt systems.
Yeah. And my son worked on one of these.
Thank you for your service. Single axis. So that's when at noon, they lie flat, and in the morning they face east, they tilt east, and they follow the sun, but they're actually flat at noon. So the curve of energy you get is a lot more, less parabolic and more of a long, wide U shape, so that you have more even energy throughout the day. I found it interesting that she said that is really good to use, but only as far north as France. After that, you have to stop that. And I checked it out, we are just a bit north of France. Like our southern U.S. border is about where France's very northern border is.
Yeah.
But she said that, or if you have lots of sun. And guess what? Government of Saskatchewan, we have lots of sun, you morons.
Yeah.
We're one of the sunniest places in North America.
Yeah. And when it's minus 40 in the winter, it's usually very, very sunny at the time.
And that's good. Cold is good for solar panels. And it's good for heating your passive solar house, I might add, too. And thankfully, though, it hasn't been minus 40 this year. We have El Nino, which is making it pretty darn warm. It's around a little below freezing, a little above freezing, which is not normal for us. It's but I'll take it. It's going to be a brown Christmas, I'm predicting. So Australia has a new record for rooftop solar installations in November. Now, this blows my mind, Brian, because as we've said on previous shows, they have over 30% of the rooftops having solar on them. That seems like that's saturated. That's as far as you can go. No. They're breaking records still. And it's still growing. And get this, the average system size is over 19 kilowatts. What's your system size?
Mine's 8.7.
And that's big.
Yeah, that's big for around here.
You have a massive roof that sprawls on for miles. It's an estate, really. And
Basically.
you have a bomb shelter, and it's just that you've got lots of roof space, and it's only
It's
8.
a large bungalow.
I don't know how that's. I guess they're including some small businesses in this. Like, it's really worthwhile in Australia to put solar, but it's becoming, such a good idea that everyone's doing it because electricity prices are high. There's really good solar resources in Australia. It's just everybody's doing it. It's become a big part of the grid. It's become a significant part of the grid, probably, I would say, more so than anywhere in the world. It's actually...
Yeah, and, on a bright, sunny day in Australia, it is an issue that, the grids have to deal with, of having sometimes probably too much power. But, you can plan for that.
India is building what could be the world's largest renewable energy project. This is solar and wind. It's one so big that it will be visible from space, according to developers. And it'll be as large as Singapore.
Wow.
So, yeah, India, we were saying half of our small city, for the whole province of Canada, could be used for wind, and that'd be the problem. Well, all of Singapore, which is huge, city-state, and it's 726 square kilometers or 280 square miles. The Indian government estimates, like I said in the intro, would be $2.25 billion. So that's... solar continues to happen, but in places where there's too much of it, then it's starting to happen. And I didn't think I'd see this day so soon, but here we are.
Yeah, it's coming. James, it's time to unveil a new segment for the show.
Oh, no.
This is called News for Sunny. Roll the theme song. Yeah, we talked about our friend Sunny a while ago. She recently put up solar panels on her house and is very interested in vehicle to home kind of technology, wants to get an EV, maybe get something that can hook up to the home and use as a backup battery. And I wanted to do News for Sunny this week because there seems to be a lot of developments.
How dare she do that before us? Who does she think she is?
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to do some news on it because it seemed there was a few developments this week. So Ford, for one, has introduced a new program. So we know that the Ford F-150 Lightning, if you buy their connector kit, can do home backup, but they're going further with that, and they're doing a partnership with a company called Residio Technologies, and this is a way to do intelligent backup power with new technology. So the idea is it uses Residio's smart thermostat to help power your home's heating and cooling system with stored energy in your truck during peak usage. So the idea of using your truck to power your home when, say, your utility is charging you peak rates at, which is often at 5 o'clock. It's just further development to what Ford already announced with their kind of home backup system, which I think is quite interesting. So, and this one is another story from Electrek. This is about Volkswagen. So Volkswagen had some announcements recently about vehicle to home. And they have said that the ID4 and other cars are now getting vehicle-to-home capability through a software update. So basically, all the Volkswagens that have a 77 kilowatt-hour battery are going to be getting a software update to do vehicle-to-home, or vehicle-to-grid and vehicle-to-home are sort of the same thing, but of course, the vehicle-to-grid is a bit more complicated, and you have to work with your local utility to see that that would actually work. Something like that does not work around here. Going forward, the ID models are going to have this kind of bi-directional charging capability, and with a software update, it should work for the current Volkswagen cars that have the 77 kilowatt-hour battery. So ID4, ID4 Pro, and so forth. So this can put out about 10 kilowatts of home power, which is about the same as what Ford does. And then the last one was the Cybertruck, which I don't think we talked about this last week, but
I might have mentioned it briefly. I think you did mention it briefly, but yeah, it's got it too, right?
Yeah, it's about the same again, like around 10 kilowatts to be able to supply power.
Oh, Sonny would look good in a Cybertruck. We all would.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect vehicle for
except
her.
Rednecks. Rednecks would. I don't care for rednecks and Cybertrucks, but
yeah. So all of these solutions do require some additional equipment. So with Tesla, it works with their wall connector charger. It's also some sort of a gateway product. I don't know. Every company has to have some kind of interface to work with the grid, and it's going to be different for everybody. And of course, check with your local utilities to see if you can actually supply to the grid, which could help, in some places earn you some spare money. As an everyday feature, I'm not sure, because your vehicle's not home all the time, there's definitely some caveats to this. It's going to work better for some people than others. And even the people that it works well for, your vehicle's not always home. So, there's certain limitations, but I really like that idea of the solar edge inverter that we talked about that, and there's others apparently as well, that can put the sunshine directly from the sun into your car when there's excess power. I think that's great.
Yeah, it is. And this seems to be people or companies meeting consumer requests. People want this, I think.
People want this. And of course, it's a very small thing now, and it's just starting. But imagine a world when we have fully transitioned to electric vehicles. And, even if only 10% of the vehicles are home, in a future where there's, a billion electric cars on the road, this is a significant addition to the grid once the grid is smart enough to use all of those, EVs around the world as, backup power to the grid.
That will happen, and it's going to be part of our energy future. We're not just going to, Jenny Chase was saying that batteries in homes doesn't make economic sense most places in the world. Almost everywhere it doesn't make any economic sense right now. But as electricity gets more expensive and as batteries become cheaper, that might be a thing. And it might be a thing where you charge the solar battery and then you charge your car with that solar power, or you charge the battery overnight. Yeah, it's going to become a thing. People who have cars, if they do have them, if ownership of cars continues into the future in the world of robo-taxis and subscription transportation services, one would have to wonder, but there's also school buses and public buses and semis and delivery vans and things that could be charged in the grid as well.
No, and even robo-taxis, they're going to have to be plugged into charge. The robo-taxis aren't going to run 24 hours a day. So if, there's millions of robo-taxis around the world, well, guess what? 10% of them are going to be plugged into the grid basically at all times.
Sure. And, a lot of them will be plugged in overnight and they'll be charged up in X amount of time, and most of them will only be used in rush hour 3 times during the day, probably. So, that's been another edition of News for Sunny.
Very nice.
That can be a regular feature.
Sure.
It's time for the tweet of the week. Yes, the tweet of the week. I'm not calling it X, I'm calling it a tweet. Michael Liebrecht, founder and contributor at Bloomberg NEF, has a tweet, and he says, batteries are often described as resource-intensive. With a 95% proven recycling rate and a 10-year lifespan currently, over 50% of battery minerals mined today will still be in use in 130 years. Wow. According to their calculations. At 5% improvement per cycle, that is, every time you replace the battery, it's 5% better, and I'm betting it's going to be better than that. And they will be delivering services forever. So now compare that with fossil fuels. Each year we burn 15 billion tons of the stuff, emitting 37 billion tons of CO2 and 135 million tons of methane. And it's single use. It's gone. It's burnt. Poof. Batteries, we're not exposed to this, but I know for a fact because my wife just told me that she saw something about batteries being minimally intensive. My hairstylist, I can't go see this SOB because he's gone down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories. Look at my hair. Christmas is coming. I can't find a new hairstylist, although I'm intrigued by yours because she sent you a Christmas card. I mean, that's something. That's something. So he finalizes this tweet by saying the Stone Age did not end for lack of stones. It ended because we figured out mining and refining. There's hope in the future for those who give a crap.
All right, so moving on to another story from Electrek. So this is about high-speed rail in the U.S. So high-speed rail, not a huge thing here in North America, but it's coming. $3 billion in funding has been earmarked for high-speed rail, Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And this is part of the Biden administration bipartisan infrastructure law as part of the Federal State Partnership Program. And apparently there's $6 billion in total. The other $3 billion is going to go to a public high-speed Los Angeles to San Francisco rail project, which we may have spoken about before on the show. But so this is 218 miles long. It goes from Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga, which this is the main reason.
Rancho Cucamonga. Yeah. I mean, is that where no. Okay, I don't know.
I just love saying it. Yeah, it's the main reason.
It would look great on the train sign.
Yeah. So Rancho Cucamonga is basically Los Angeles. It says it's 37 miles east of downtown. So it's Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga in 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is about half the time that it would take you to drive. And I love projects like this because I could really see that kind of travel, people on a whim, hop on the train and go to Las Vegas.
And lose all their money.
And so the company, Brightline West, estimates that it's going to remove 3 million cars from the I-15, the road that goes there, and reducing approximately 400,000 tons of carbon emissions every year because of it. So they want this to open in 2028 is the plan.
Wow. 2028? Are you kidding me? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like the other train from Los Angeles to San Francisco is taking decades and decades and untold billions of dollars. Like, it's just, I guess there's a lot of desert in between those two cities. So, and I'm wondering, Las Vegas should flip the bill for this because they're going to get all the benefit. It's not
they're going to get,
there's Las Vegas has people, but they're not all going to go to Los Angeles all the time. It seems far-fetched to me. Am I wrong?
I mean, I'm no expert, but yeah, certainly these kinds of projects tend to take a very long time. So, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. We'll just report back in 2028.
You got to buy the land. So it goes through Barstow and Baker, two very Republican places, I believe. The interior of California is the Republican part. So, okay. Well, I mean, that seems like two places from LA to San Francisco, and Las Vegas will be the two places you would send a high-speed train to. Brian, EV sales may not be as bad as you've heard. We've heard a lot of negative press lately about EV sales. Well, the fact is, Bloomberg NEF, who analyzes this stuff, says it's a little bit below what they predicted, but it's not abysmal. They predicted it would be a bit more, but it's not really terrible either. The U.S. Department of Energy says Americans bought 1 million EVs so far this year. That is a record-breaking year for single-year sales. And that's probably happened in October, I think. We'll see.
The year's not over yet.
Maybe in February we'll hear about what the final of the year is. So it's going quite well for them. And global electric car sales are set to surge 35% this year to reach 14 million sales per year. 10 million were sold last year. We'd like to see it go faster than that, but it's still on the S curve. The U.S. and world were less than anticipated, but it's still growing fast. EV sales in China are running far ahead of what regulations require. So it's not just, a lot of this in the West are saying that everyone there is being forced to buy EVs because it's a communist country. Well, the regulations are one thing, but the consumers are out consuming the regulations. They're buying more EVs than they need to, and that is on pace. And we have a chart here from Bloomberg NEF. I just thought I would mention that. And Brian, my son, sent me a tweet. It's not a letter, not an official letter, but he did send me a tweet over text. He said, the tweet says, Ireland broke its record wind energy output with 4,615 megawatts. That's 4.6 gigawatts, while providing 75% of the country's power needs. This is onshore wind in Ireland. And so I asked my son, why'd you send me this? I know you knew I'd be interested, but, as a 20-year-old, like, what registers with you? And he says, I didn't realize Ireland had so much energy potential onshore, given that it's a coastal nation with a high ocean shelf. But apparently, unlike BC, in Canada that has mountains right there, Ireland just kind of channels the wind inland from the ocean, and that's a good thing. And he also didn't realize it has free education at all levels, and it's thinking of moving there. Good for you, Ireland.
Wow.
So the next big development You know, the tweet goes on to say that Ireland has never had any energy resources before, something that has historically held the country back. Now, Brian, this is something I can see happening with a lot of countries, African nations with solar potential and offshore wind potential, and a lot of places that didn't have power. And that's what we don't like here in oil-rich Canada, in Alberta and Saskatchewan that has oil.
Yeah.
They don't want to give up the supreme nature of their oil.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Clean energy is energy security because everybody can make it. Not every country has oil. Not every country has gas or even coal. And you have to import it, and that's damn expensive.
It's democratic. You and I and our friend Sonny has solar on the roof. We can make our own energy.
Power.
We can power our vehicles. We can power our homes and do it ourselves. And that's incredible. And they say on this tweet, the next big development in Irish energy security is the Celtic Interconnector, a 700 megawatt interconnector to France, allowing them to trade excess wind to France and the ability to buy nuclear energy from France. So, you can give your wind to France and take back some nuclear when you need it. Brian, it's time to dip into the mailbag. And we've got quite a few letters this week. I'm only going to touch on a couple. And even they are, some of these are novels. But this is from Shannon. And we appreciate all your letters. And I'm not saying don't write novels because we read them and we enjoy them. And we love your feedback. That's what we live on. That and some protein. This is from Shannon. I enjoy listening to your podcast regularly with my husband. Wow, a husband. See, we've... A couple activity listening to the podcast.
Nice.
That's actually new to me. I've heard people listening on subways, working on green energy projects, dropping tools when the sound gets too loud, but not a couple activity. Imagine what happens if it becomes a multi-couple activity where, couples get together and say, let's listen to the Clean Energy Show. And they gather around the radio or whatever it is, the iPod. I'm writing to hopefully persuade you to stop spreading misinformation by calling pollution pricing a carbon tax. And I apologize for that. She says people are misinformed about pollution pricing and the climate action incentive payments. This is in Canada. And she attaches documentation and goes on. No need. I hate it when people call carbon pricing the carbon tax. I just got into the vernacular of what the discussion online is, and I lost my mind and said that. But yes, carbon pricing, not a carbon tax.
Yeah, pollution pricing. Yeah, I've certainly said that too. Pollution pricing is just a better term. I mean, definitely lots of people call it a carbon tax. But pollution pricing was always just a better term anyway, because it's a better descriptor of what it is. If you're going to pollute, you're dumping garbage, you have to pay a fee for dumping garbage, and that's pollution pricing.
As there's political upheaval in Canada, people are thinking that it's all their problems are based now on the carbon tax, whereas they approved it in a couple of elections, or they approved a government that wasn't, but Don, regular listener, sent us a note on reconsidering the Cybertruck. He said, if you're interested in the grudgingly contrary take on the Cybertruck, he sent me a scripted video of the pre-release Cybertruck showing some of the tech behind the fugly duckling, as he calls it. This is from the Haggerty YouTube channel, a very popular car and truck review channel that is very slick. It is scripted. They write their script in advance, but they didn't this time because they got the Cybertruck kind of without advance warning. They got it for a day. Did you watch the video?
Yeah, it's scripted kind of in the way that like Top Gear videos are scripted. And it was scripted this time, but he just had less time to do it because there was a tight turnaround time. He
kind of had to write two scripts, one that he hated it and one that he liked it, because he assumed he would hate it.
Yeah, but it's very much like Top Gear, like really heavily produced type of videos, which I think are quite fun.
Yeah, they are. They're great to watch and they're entertaining. And he's a very intelligent person, unlike a lot of car reviewers. I'm not pointing any fingers, but the guy is like got an engineering degree or something, and so do his co-hosts. On the podcast, which I'll get to in a second. So yeah, it's a glowing review. He didn't expect to like it. The highlights include its maneuverability on a go-kart track, which you shouldn't be able to do in a big pickup truck to turn those winding turns, but he did because the rear wheels turn on the Cybertruck, don't they?
Yeah.
And that allows you to have great maneuverability in a tight parking lot or on a tight construction site. But I listened to his audio podcast. He also has an audio podcast he had some thoughts that stood out to me that you may not quite have gotten from his video.
It was such an about face. I went into the video incredibly thankful to Tesla for the opportunity to be one of apparently 3 people in the world to drive it. But I went in with this, oh God, how am I going to make this positive? Like, I can't bite the hand that feeds me. So I'm like, well, I'll just make it all about information, and I'll just be all about information, and I don't put my opinion in there. But during the course of filming, I went from thinking, oh God, why the f- did they do this? To like, wow, why the f- did they do this? They didn't have to, but they did it. And that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Now, looking forward to that technology, maybe not being in something that I wouldn't want to park in front of my house because of what it says, in the same way that I wouldn't want to park a Hummer.
So this is something that I've been wondering and we've been discussing. It's like, it's great. Of course it's great. I mean, it's been a letdown in price. It's been a letdown in range. It's been a letdown in some of the specifications, such as towing. We were hoping for better results from Tesla to outdo everyone else. But would you park it in front of your house? I think it's kind of what people who drive a Hummer, it's a statement vehicle.
Yeah, well, North America, gigantic trucks are the commonplace thing. So I think most people in North America will not have a problem parking it in front of their house.
I do, Brian. I take my son sent me another note saying, tell Brian the Cybertruck's not going to work. It's not going to truck people are not going to buy the Cybertruck. And this is another clip from Haggerty's podcast.
There's all kinds of capability in here. We'll see if Elon's dream is shared by millions of others about what the future of a pickup
People
truck
like trucks, especially in this country.
But will they accept something that is this different?
Yeah. I have some hope that maybe people will, but I also think that maybe they won't. I think that there's a good chance they won't. But regular truck buyers, you're going to see software engineers driving them up and down, Tesla fanboys left and right, and a few people who want to make a statement. But I don't think your regular truck guys who listen to country music are going to have a country song about the Cybertruck unless they're making fun of it.
We just talked about Ford cutting their production in half. So that's the advantage that Tesla has, is they're just going to put the pedal to the metal and make as many of these as they possibly can. So yeah, perhaps there won't be people to buy them, but when there's a huge supply of them and they can bring the price down a little bit, they're going to sell every one that they can make, I think, for the next few years.
Okay, thanks for everyone who wrote in, including those we didn't have time for. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And as we always say, we'd like to hear from you. We'd love to hear anything you have to say about the show. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Climate campaigners and politicians have reacted with fury to the news that the UK Climate Change Minister, Graham Stewart, has returned to London from COP28. Apparently getting homesick. Chevy Bolt is returning as the EUV only, the slightly larger version of the vehicle. It's mini SUV only version. That will be out as early as 2025 with LFP batteries, and different factories going to be making the vehicle. So it's actually not going to be too much of a lull before they bring it back. The LFP batteries, of course, are cheaper, right? Yeah. We'll talk more about it in future shows. Sales are up a whopping 125% of the Chevy Bolt, but that's why they canceled it.
Is that why?
See, they don't always cancel these EV programs because it's not selling. They don't want to sell things because they're losing money. They're not like Tesla. They got too many different departments and too many suppliers. They make very little of their own parts, and it's an expensive proposition. Many Bolts were acquired for around $20,000 after rebates. That's crazy. I mean, why wouldn't you buy 6 of them?
Yeah.
I mean, you should at least have one as a city car if you didn't like the charging speed or the size, you know?
No, in addition to the federal tax credit in the U.S., different states have other incentives. So yeah, the prices can be quite low. So shop around for your local incentives.
Honda is pulling the plug on their only electric car in Europe, the e-Mini. They had low expectations for how many they'd sell, and they didn't sell very many of them. It's too pricey, Brian, and too little range. And EV buyers are not stupid.
I love the design of it. It's a super cool car, but it's got a tiny battery. So it's really just a city runabout. So that's always going to kind of limit your audience, and also it's very, very small, maybe a little bit too small.
And this was also submitted by my son. The British Columbia provincial government is set to amend the building code to allow mass timber buildings up to 18 stories. The existing limit is 12 stories. And of course, everyone in the comments says, what if it burns down? We have fires in my building every week. It's not that simple. Plus, there's a concrete stairwell / elevator, and so far, and they are earthquake proof. Believe it or not, there are some of them that have withstood very strong earthquakes. But well,
you'd think timber would definitely have some give to it, which is probably good in an earthquake. But there's been a resurgence in building with wood. It's maybe a bit more environmentally friendly.
And that story you can find on thedailyhive.com. Battery swapping scooter company Gore, mentioned many times on the show, is introducing the first India-made smart scooter, the Gore Crossover GX250. Our battery swapping network is available today in Delhi and Goa, with expansion to more cities and consumers soon. That's terrific news. There's already a huge mega factory in India making scooters under $1,000. They're made exclusively by women who are employed there, and they're hoping to bring down prices, but they're not battery swappable. Gore is now entered the Indian market, and we expect good things, I bet, from them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
This is a CS Fast Fact. It says Clean Energy Canada, even in Alberta, Canada, the province with the oil sands, the tar sands, the gross sands, where in 2022, 82% of power came from natural gas and coal, battery electric vehicles still produce 60% lower emissions than gas cars. 16% less.
Yeah, which is a thing you often hear that, what's the point of having an electric car because the grid is dirty? Well, they're more efficient, so they're still cleaner.
And I hate having to fight with people constantly. The U.S. federal government and the Maryland state government will work together to identify additional areas offshore Maryland that will house future offshore wind projects. I've seen people argue recently that governments in this climate crisis should be doing the surveys of the offshore sites of their state or country and then say, okay, we did it. That part is over. Now, who wants to build there? Let the government do that part, do the hard part of the surveys, and let the companies and, the free market come in. It was another CS Fast Fact. Carbon pricing, not a carbon tax. Although, if you want to speak to the people who are complaining about this, you would tell them the carbon pricing. Carbon pricing accounts for only 0.3% increase in food prices. That's 30 cents. On $100 grocery items. You talk to people on the street, they think it was 50%. That the entire inflation of food is from the carbon price, and that's why we're going to vote out the federal government. It's not. It's 30 cents on $100. It's nothing. It's like the carbon tax on the trucks that bring the groceries around. Remember, the next time you're promised affordability at the grocery store by axing the so-called tax. Bloomberg says car rental firms are confronting early bumps on the road to EVs. Hertz and others have been burnt by Tesla's price cuts because they went and bought tens of thousands of cars at a price. And then you know how the model for car rental companies works. They sell them at the high point they usually get a discount, and then they sell them at the high point, which sometimes is 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah, they don't keep them very long typically.
And so they got burnt by that because Tesla greatly decreased their prices recently due to demand. So Tesla Cybertruck has a wade mode, according to Electric, that pressurizes the battery to drive through water. We had one of our friends here in Saskatchewan drive through a flood in his Tesla thinking he could do it. He totaled his car. Fortunately, insurance covered it. The battery packs are supposed to be water resistant, but they're pressurizing.
Yeah, sealed.
They're pressurizing.
I'm not sure how they would pressurize the battery pack, but that sounds cool.
You're not an engineer. You're not an air pressure engineer. You're just
I'm barely a podcaster.
Hyundai and Kia boost another breakthrough, unveiling new tires with retractable snow chains. Did you see that one, Brian? And what the hell?
Yeah, I saw that video. It was the strangest thing. There's sort of 4 metal rods that wrap around the tire, and they can be either recessed, and so then only the rubber touches the road, or then they can be like popped up a few millimeters and then give you some traction, apparently. Yeah, that was kind of weird.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. The first utility-scale offshore wind farm in the United States is officially open and actually providing energy to the grid. That's the South Fork Wind Farm, and it will provide enough energy to power 70,000 homes. The COP28 stage was stormed by a 12-year-old Indian climate activist in Dubai on Monday. She held up a sign saying, "End fossil fuel, save our planet and our future," before she was being escorted off stage and before being beaten senseless, presumably. Senseless? I don't know. Apparently there's been a lot of complaints about security and cameras and Dubai is not a free country. It's China with money. EPA data shows Rivians are more efficient than Cybertrucks, even with larger wheels and batteries. How about that? I expected the Cybertruck, Tesla's been an efficiency leader. They've been sort of caught up by high-end IKEA from time to time, but they're known for their efficiency. So that's a good job.
That's interesting. The actual EPA figures for the Cybertruck are not out yet, but yeah, it sounds like the Rivians are slightly more efficient. Speaking of India, is aiming to get 50,000 electric buses on its streets by 2027 with help from a joint finance mechanism with the United States. Impossible Foods, Inc. is a company, known for its plant-based burgers, is adding hot dogs to its lineup starting in 2024. I like that, Brian, because I have a hot dog problem. You're a hot dog
I have a hot dog problem. I don't want to eat whatever it is they put in hot dogs, and it's not good. Hopefully, the bad thing about hot dogs is the smokiness of them, prepared meats is carcinogens. I don't know if they're going to reduce that or not. I'm kind of hoping they are. And then, I'll be testing it first thing on the show as soon as we get a wiener in our hands. Some New Yorkers will be able to try them out this month before they officially hit stores. And finally this week, as I said earlier, Al Gore is angry, and he should be. In his TED Talk, he was very angry, but he ends it on a positive note about the climate if we can just stop emitting.
If we get to true net zero, astonishingly, global temperatures will stop going up with a lag time of as little as 3 to 5 years. They used to think that positive feedback loops would keep that process going. No, it will not. The temperatures will stop going up. The ice will continue melting and some other things will continue, but we can stop the increase of temperatures. Even better, if we stay at true net zero in as little as 30 years, half of all the human-caused CO2 will come out of the atmosphere into the upper ocean and the trees and vegetation. So young people are demanding that we do the right thing. Do not be vulnerable to despair. We are going to do this. And if you doubt that we as human beings have the will to act, please always remember that the will to act is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much.
And that is our show for this week. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and around social media, you can find us as Clean Energy Pod.
Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for angry videos from me and other special features, including the full podcast this week. Have a look at the Clean Energy Show's store for merch. That's in your show notes. Lots of links in your show notes to everything. It's the time of year where we ask for money. Send us money on PayPal. You can do it one time. Send us a couple bucks to buy a cup of coffee. Some people send us a couple bucks every month. They can set up on PayPal as well. If you're new to the show, subscribe and write us a podcast review. That always helps us. We'll see you early next week with another edition of the Clean Energy Show.
See you next week.